All right, everyone, welcome back to our classes following last week's work in Innovation Academy and you catching up on some work that you maybe need to do. So again, for this week, we're going to have a couple of recorded lessons, and also you'll have a current events assignment, which will be due on Friday. So for this week, we're going to be looking at life following World War I and some of the changes that are going on and some of the situations that are going to arise that are going to lead us to World War II. So our first lesson for this week is Postwar Changes. So our objectives and standards, explain the changes that occurred in the post-war world and recognize how life changed for people around the world. And our standards, if you would please take a look at them. Okay, we have our vocabulary preview. I'm going to start doing this a little bit differently than how we've been doing it. I would like to give you guys the definitions along with the terms. That way you kind of have them if you want to, pause the recording here. You can always write them down, but at least you have them. That way as we go through the lesson, you kind of know what we're talking about. So we have four vocab words for this lesson. Theory of relativity, which is Einstein's idea on relative motion. Existentialism, the belief that there is no universal meaning to life and people create their own meaning through choices and actions. Surrealism, which is an art movement that sought to link the world of dreams with real life. And then jazz, which you've probably heard of before, may have listened to as well, is a popular music style that features lively and loose beats. All right, so remember to do the think about this question. In what ways can culture change the world? And here's just some hints for you to help you answer that. Think about music, art, literature, and technology. How do those things change, and how do those changes in those areas impact the world and people in the world? And our central question, again, just to be thinking about this as we go through the lesson, how was the world changing following the First World War? All right, so science changes. So there were two big leaders of changes in the early 1900s in the field of science. One of these was a German-born physicist by the name of Albert Einstein. You may or may not have heard of him before. He studied time, space, energy, and matter, and he is mostly known for developing the theory of relativity in 1905. And what Einstein basically states in this is that time and space do not have a constant rate of motion such as light. He says that light has a constant rate or a constant speed, and he says that time and space do not necessarily have that. And so this kind of changes how people think about, time and motion and things like that, and outer space and things like that. If you have any questions on that, you can probably reach out to, if you have a physics teacher or a science teacher, maybe they'll be able to explain a little bit better than what I can. But that's the basic, background to that. So for psychology, so for those of you who don't know, psychology is the study of the brain and why we act and do the things we do. So there was an Austrian physician, his name was Sigmund Freud, and he changed the field of psychology. He believed that the human mind is irrational, that that we it's not always thinking the same way. And we know that, right? That our thoughts and feelings constantly change. And he stated that people are often driven by pleasure-seeking thoughts and behaviors. So the way we act and how we behave is uh, based off of seeking pleasure and things like that. When you're hungry, you want to eat. When you're thirsty, you need a drink, or other things. If you're tired, you may want to take a nap. So those are the things. We go to bed at night because we're tired and we sleep. So those types of pleasure-seeking thoughts. Everything we do, according to Freud, is based off of seeking pleasure or enjoyment. So on the left-hand side there, this man here, this is Albert Einstein. You may have seen his picture before with the crazy hair and things like that. And then this picture here is Sigmund Freud. Okay? Excuse me. Okay, so literature. So many people were terrified and shocked at the horrors as a result of the First World War. We talked about, people coming home wounded, people not coming home at all, the destruction of cities and towns and villages and the environment and things like that. So people are just kind of very much shocked at what happened during the First World War. So to express their concerns, many writers wrote about their fears for the future, what was going to happen in the future. Okay, just kind of very, I don't want to say horror stories, but it's just kind of more dark. Again, like just worry and concern people were writing about. Another idea that emerged from this literature movement is known as existentialism, and this is more of a philosophy. But what it is a belief that there is no universal meaning to life. So people were kind of moving away from the traditional religious views of life in some aspects. Some people were at least, and stating that that people create their own meaning to life. People always asked, and we still ask to this day, what is the meaning of life? And a lot of people have religious views on that, and you have your own views, I'm sure. Um, but like I was saying, people are moving away from the traditional religious views of what is life during this time, and more saying that people make their own meaning of life based on their own choices and actions. Okay, so people aren't in charge of people. Excuse me, people are in charge of their life. Okay, is what they're basically saying. And many views of existentialism emerged from this man, German. He was a German philosopher by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. I believe how you say that. And um, as we go through these next couple of lessons over the week, a lot of his views will be expressed in Germany and Italy and lead to a lot of different views and changing policies of the time. All right, so art. So artists also began to rebel against old forms of art. Many want to express and show emotion and use their imagination as opposed to showing real objects like painting a tree or painting a family. Okay. Cubism, and again, some people you may recognize, like Pablo Picasso, he's big during this time, changed traditional shapes of triangles, squares, circles, broke them apart and made them into different forms of artwork, and I'll show you down the next slide. And surrealism, another one of our vocab words, also came into the art world as an attempt to show unconscious parts of the mind of artists. So again, kind of going off of like dreams and imagination instead of just focusing on what things look like in the real world. Kind of taking what things look like in the real world and changing them in a different way. Okay, so we have our two examples here. One of these on the top there is an example of cubism. So you can see it obviously looks like a cat or some type of member of the cat family, right? And you can see the shapes are broken apart to, put back together to kind of make it look like a cat. So that would be an example of cubism. On the bottom there, we have an example of surrealism. Again, a picture of nature, but it looks like it's enclosed in a jar or a fishbowl or something like that. Again, so using your imagination and that unconscious part of your mind to make something that is a little different. All right, so music. So musical genres also changed. Classical music changed from being very gentle, maybe, or more soothing melodies to very irregular rhythms and harsher tones. So again, going off of the First World War and an industry and everything like that, and all these different things that are going on. Musicians are going to begin to form music around those ideas of harsh, hard labor, hard work, war, things like that. And there's also a new musical style known as jazz, again, one of your other vocab words. So I'll put that there. Was also becoming popular. This emerged from the United States, and jazz had kind of been around for many many years. It was created by mostly African American musicians, but it begins to change a little bit and becomes more popular as it focuses on like more upbeat rhythms and lively tunes and stuff like that. And it quickly spreads to Europe. Again, jazz just kind of becomes a very popular musical style during this time. All right, so the role of women. After the First World War, the role of women changed as well. So remember that women had contributed to the war effort by going to work while the men were away as soldiers, or whatever the case may be. Women also volunteered as nurses and things like we talked a lot about a lot of different things that women did during the war effort. Um, so women are going to continue to push for working and keeping jobs, and some of them will continue to work in the post-war world. Sorry, tongue twisted there. Um, but they also look to expand their rights to the political area as well. Before World War I, many women did not have the right to vote, even in our country of the United States. So following the war, many women began to push more for voting rights. And these voting rights are going to be granted to many women in countries such as our own, like the United States, and then other places like Germany, Great Britain, Sweden, and Austria. So again, women begin to gain the right to vote following the First World War. Okie doke, so technology advances. So technology also changed in the early 1900s. New drugs and medicine are going to help people remain healthy. And we talked about this a little bit, but the automobile industry, which had, kind of emerged a little bit, is also going to help create new jobs. Rubber factories for tires, engines, other metal parts. So again, the automobile industry is going to help spur new industries that are going to help create jobs. The price of cars also dropped following the First World War, so many more people could now afford this new way of transportation. So many people could begin to afford many cars, and we begin to see kind of an increase in automobiles around the world. Airplanes also became very popular, so air travel became a new popular way of traveling. There were many people such as Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart who gained fame as pilots. I was actually, when I was down in DC over spring break, we went to the Air and Space Museum, and I was reading about many different air shows and pilots and things like that, and, that were very popular during the time, which was kind of interesting to me because I kind of personally learned something too about many of these different famous pilots and things like that I had not known about. So that was kind of a knowledge gaining thing for me. Now, airplanes were also very expensive to fly on, and only the wealthy could really use an airplane to travel or go from place to place. But again, people are going to just simply be amazed at this new way to travel and quickly get from point A to point B. All right, last slide. So popular entertainment. So people began to enjoy new forms of entertainment. The radio we talked about had been developed in 1895, but it gained more use during the First World War, the Global War. After World War One, radio broadcast stations quickly emerged, and they became suppliers of music and news and entertainment. So people could turn on the radio at home while they're cleaning their house or cooking a meal, or even just have friends gather together to listen to the radio. Motion pictures also emerged as forms of entertainment around the world. So movie stars, maybe you know this man's name from a silent movie star, Charlie Chaplin. People like that began to entertain people around the globe as well. So again, just different forms of entertainment that people are using to have fun and enjoy themselves. All right, so we'll wrap up. So remember we talked about the area of science changed in many different ways. We talked about Einstein and Freud and their impacts on science. Art, literature, and music also expressed the views of people. Literature expressing some of the more negative fears and thoughts that people had following World War One. Art began to change a little bit in terms of cubism and surrealism, and music changed as well. Classical music changes, and we also have the kind of spread of jazz music around the world. And finally, technology. We talked about automobiles and airplanes, along with popular entertainment like the radio. Now you can see that older radio there. And motion pictures changed how people traveled and also how they enjoyed themselves. All right, so that's kind of what's going on in this post-war world following World War One. All right. All right, guys, that's all I have for this lesson. So just, again, please make sure you try your best on the questions. If you have any concerns or issues, please let me know. And I will see you next time.